Thank you for tuning in to the World Builder's Anvil, Season 3, Episode 4. The mysterious, mythic, medium, meddling, marvelous. Jeff, why are all these M's here?
Because M's are cool.
I mean, I've always thought so, but I mean, there's like 6 more.
They're
How much
majestic.
alliteration do you need?
I want to get 13 more M words in there if you can.
Oh, for God's sake. We're going after M to P. This episode's about power.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. This is the marvelous Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And this is the malicious Michael Miller.
Yes, and bringing you the M cubed of powers, because really what we're talking about today are powers for characters. It's an important thing in most genre fiction. And the reason it's mythic is because what makes it fantasy is there's like some kind of magical, mythical kind of backdrop to typically the powers characters have. Not necessarily like you're like, oh, he's just a great fighter. But ultimately, if all the characters in the books are just great fighters, and there's nothing really mythical like power behind it, you're doing fiction on a different world. But just Earth-like fiction somewhere else or something. You're not really doing fantasy. Fantasy, there's a mythicalness to it. It's not always the characters, but in here we're going to talk about in the relationship to characters.
I would say that even if you're not working with, supernatural, superhero, or fantasy, that characters are going to have powers regardless, even if it's completely reality-based. Like, there's a reason you're following this character. It's because they're special in some fashion.
Yeah, they have a
Or maybe they're not special in any fashion and they're an everyman, but there will still be something special about them.
They're so
somehow.
Average, they're special.
Exactly.
That's
a superpower, averageness.
That's a superpower. And it's so funny because even I'm involved in a lot of personal empowerment kind of education based around business because of the types of work we're doing. It takes a lot out of you, and you need people smarter than you around you to help you. Julie Stoyan is a person that we work with for marketing for our Ingram Digital Media business. And obviously I haven't implemented any of her work here. But the thing is, she even will say, as a business person, you have to identify your superpower and find ways to sell that to the people that you're connecting to. So even like mundane people, we all have superpowers. So the thing to keep in mind is, at some level, throughout all fictions, the thing that makes fantasy is the fact that there's this mystical magicalness behind it. If it was a tech thing, it would be science fiction. If it was strictly a supernatural gift because you're an angel, it might be, like a supernatural kind of or horror fiction or something like that. But and fantasy kind of incorporates, I think, supernatural and horror fiction for the most part. But the thing is, it could be superpowers like, Superman. Once again, those are obvious powers. They might not always be obvious, and you don't always need to know the connection. Like, your character is a much better swordsman at a very young age. You don't always have to explain it. But maybe you're the character of prophecy. Maybe it's the gods have blessed you. You drank from the magic fountain of Willy Wonka. Which would be cool if you could.
Wouldn't that be?
You don't necessarily always need to go through and identify it, but it's a fun exercise to get you to know your characters better. Because remember, ultimately, as the creator, you need to know your characters well enough that you don't need to ask more questions. And sometimes that will give you, if you're struggling with their motivations and stuff, knowing the mythicalness behind their powers, even if you don't reveal it to the reader, makes you reevaluate, this came to them really easy. So maybe everything came to them really easy. So maybe that affects their personality. So it will allow you to kind of warp and change their personalities to know. So you don't really need to go through all of this. Sometimes it's obvious, like, where does magic come from? Is it, demon spawn magic, or is it just like
All
a
good
force
magic
of
is.
nature? Once again, that can inform you on the people who use it. Michael sticks to all of the demon form magic.
Big fan. I love necromancy.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. This could be a very abrupt change in topic because I had a complete audio meltdown and we have no idea where we're at. So.
Yeah, I know we were just talking about powers and stuff, but that was a half hour ago for us. Sorry, guys.
So we apologize.
Yeah, lots of technical difficulties this morning. It's been a while since we've been plagued, so I feel like it's we don't do too bad. We've had in the past really, really bad ones, and it's kind of funny that this one happened this morning. So basically, I know part of what you were talking about was not necessarily that your reader or avatar needs to know how a character got their powers, but you as the writer should. You should know. Yeah. That way, when it comes to dealing with that character's perspectives and motivations, you have a concept of where it's coming from. They know how special they are, or actually allow me to be more specific. They may not know how special they are. Yeah. Like some people are, like Neo did not know how special he was.
No,
but that was part of the story, is him discovering that. So, but you as the writer, the delivery system, you should know. Like you don't want to just create a character and be like, this character is going to be, a super special character. I have no idea why or how, just I intend him to be special. Put a little more into that character's creation before you start writing.
And because too, it could help inform you as you, like if you're struggling in other parts of the personality, so then go, well, things come easy to them here. Maybe they're limited here because of their powers or why they can do things. Like your classic D&D thing is you get tired when you do magic, right? You get fatigued when you do magic. So, one of the limiting, things are, yeah, sure, he's really good at doing things, but he doesn't have endurance.
He doesn't have
just endurance.
Endurance. Okay, I couldn't hear you.
And it could go beyond. Like he's really good at starting, but then he quickly gives up. But like as a personality trait, not beyond just because he uses magic, but sometimes powers and the way people are and habits are informed of who they are, and the powers here are what makes the person special, and they can impact, and I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is this will allow you to tweak your character archetypes to make them your own, because you sit there and make decisions like, this character Michael is really good at doing physical activities. So anything around there, he's kind of, he doesn't practice a lot maybe because, he's so good at doing things.
Comes to him easily.
But he focuses his energy on his studies. So maybe, he has a little more book smarts than most people around his age too, because he doesn't have to put the effort in doing the physical things that are needed in the society, place, and time of his character. So that's just a quick example that comes to me. The thing is to keep in mind, is really important things about characters will impact how they interact with everything in their life. It helps empower you to better develop your character and get a more memorable character as you go forward. Beyond strictly knowing that he is Super Michael and he can bounce bullets off of his chest. That's wonderful, but what else does that mean?
I can bounce bullets off my chest. I just, pick up a bullet and kind of throw it at my chest.
Let's not prove that. Okay.
I can't, if it's going really fast.
It only works if no one's paying attention.
It only works if I take the bullet in my fingertips and then throw it at myself. Then they bounce right off.
Is there a different way that would happen? Yeah. Yeah, hopefully not. Okay.
Let's not test that theory.
We will not test that theory. Normally I like to test, but not in this circumstance. Okay. There is...
this demands experimentation.
How is it mythical too? Because to me, that kind of informs things. If you're playing in a world where there are gods present, having a godly endowed power is a lot more meaningful than not.
Think of paladins.
Think of paladins, or think of all your Greek heroes are god power. That's
there
why
you go.
Heroes.
Big time. They take that stuff seriously. And sometimes those gods take those powers away, and that becomes a big chunk of the story too.
Yes, that's another way you can take the story, but understand how they're mythical. And like I said, you could just be the person of an edge and And all you really know is the legend that says that this person's coming, and this lone wanderer is coming to be our salvation. So if you know that, you can understand that it's something ancient and mystical, right? People might not even remember what that was, and maybe there's actually a different kind of explanation, but that's what makes it fantasy, is there's this thing that does something to you. And one of the things I want to keep in mind too is, in fantasy, it does not always have to be about the character. King Arthur had a sword that was mythical, which proved his lineage and his background and his greatness. But the sword itself was endowed with the mythical powers. A lot of times in fantasy, especially if you're like in D&D style fantasy, it's like you have your racial powers. Like I've been reading some Drisk books recently. I think RA and Bob and
Bobby.
but he'll talk about the innate powers of Drow. He can levitate. He can do a circle of darkness. He can do certain things, certain mythical powers connected to him as a race.
Night vision? I don't know if you would call that mythical. Infravision.
That
that's
fancy terms probably is but really it doesn't have to be. But I would typically think of it, if I'm creating a fantasy world, in terms that there's a mythical reason why the Drow found a need and do survive deep underground. So there is a mythical thing to it, but it's maybe not directly linked to a power or a reason. Because infravision for a Drow was probably more, the reason they kept non-infravision might be the bigger question of the mythical thing of why they can see when it, in the natural spectrum as well. Because I know when you read Bob's books, they can change back and forth between normal vision or infravision, and they do so.
Handy.
Yeah, that is very handy. Yes. Now, and it can also be places. That's another big place for powers too, right? Like Stonehenge, and many ancient mythologies or places like that. There are places out.
The Lady in the Lake, so bodies of water.
In the lake, bodies of water. Sometimes it depends on the culture. Most early pre-Iron Age civilizations had their temples outside because there's something special about the spot you build the temple, and you build a temple in special spots.
Also, I mean, let's not minimize celestial bodies that are visible from these spots too.
Yes,
so it may not necessarily be stars. It may not necessarily be the spot itself, but it happens to be the spot where you can see things a certain way. So it's the fact that you can see things. It could be any place, but if you could see those things, that's what makes it special. And
now when you think about but remember right now we're talking about from the context of a character, but it's their connection to a race or a place or the possession of a prop that makes them special. Keep that in mind. The power doesn't necessarily always need to be this, and that makes it a great limiting factor. Like Michael is super powerful wizard man on 123rd 2nd Street in Windsor, Connecticut. But if he goes over,
I make sure all my fights happen there.
If he goes over one lot,
right?
It's
man. He fights everybody in that neighborhood. I don't know why. He's got like a thing for that. Good audience. It's a good audience there. I like the people that show up.
That's right.
Well, there'd be more room if we fought in Hartford. Nope. It's got to be Windsor on that
Windsor.
street.
But here's the exact address.
Here's the address. Look, don't get lost. Just make sure you're there on time.
Be their evil foe. Okay. But so keep in mind, sometimes you don't have to directly link the power to the character, but you need the connection, and sometimes it's developed over a story, or or like Michael says, it can be taken away and then given back. Keep in mind that there are lots of different reasons why people have powers, but you want to understand the mythical nature, and then sort of brainstorm out, would it be interesting if I do this with a character, especially if you're struggling making that character and finding their motivations, figure out where and how they have their powers, and that could inform it. Maybe he's a great fighter, but he doesn't want to be, but he's blessed by the gods. So for him to reject his fighting ability would be to slap in the face of the gods. And maybe that even creates a whole story.
Yeah, I was about to say, and that happens.
That could be
There's
a story. Yeah.
Many Greek mythologies where the gods get angered by the person they liked.
Mm-hmm. They turn against you, or because God A likes you, God B hates you. That's probably the more common reason gods hate you in Greek mythology.
Very common.
But either way, that's makes for great stories for people to read but not be involved in. So I said it's like always great to read stories of Greek heroes. You don't want to be part of their story.
What do you mean Hera doesn't like me?
Yeah. Oh, well, why don't you go have a nice day and I'm going to go over here. I'm not going to help you. But then all of a sudden now Zeus is mad, right? So you just can't win anything.
You can't win.
You meet the hero.
I feel like Zeus doesn't get as mad as Hera does. I mean, he does, but it just seems like she's usually more mad.
Yeah. Well, let's see. He's probably raping someone because of it. He was very much of a raper.
No, all of his moves were consensual.
That's right.
He just,
Yeah, of course, she naturally wanted to have sex with the swan.
And she definitely wanted to become a cow forever.
Forever, that's right.
Forever.
Forever.
But actually, Zeus didn't do that. Didn't Hera do that to her because of Zeus?
Punishment, yeah.
I think it was a punishment, which is silly because, again, she was manipulated by Zeus. So it's like...
Blaming the victim is never...
Yeah, victim blame. Exactly.
All right. But that's really it. I mean, there's no real good formula here for people to do. You don't want to overpower your characters. If you give them lots of powers, make sure everyone in the story has lots of powers, or you run into the Superman problem, right? If you have a character who's radically above everyone else's power level, you run into the storytelling issues that people have with Superman in most of the movies. Is he's so much more powerful than everything else. You have to, it's going to have to be another Kryptonian foe. Because,
or like any time in the 80s Superman, it was always Kryptonite was always involved somehow because there was
it's really hard to get rid of, but the villains seem to have an endless source of it.
Yes, but you got to weaken him somehow, otherwise he's just going to walk through everything.
Now I found a blue kind.
Oh no, wait, this guy's made out of radioactive material, which for some reason hurts Superman, even though he can fly in space.
Yes. No radiation up there.
Yeah. And radiation hurts Superman now for some silly reason.
Well, sometimes it's hard to get away from that when you're writing. Sometimes it's hard to get away from those, especially the longer you do stories, the harder it is to get away from retconning or changing characters because you make decisions and sometimes in the long term they don't pan out the way you expect, or you don't think of. There's the law of unintended consequences that will always come back to bite you, no matter how well you think the stuff out. So, I didn't really think of it in that context. Yeah, of course not. That's why it was unintended consequence. But now, for your world-building task here for season 3, episode 4, think of your creator side as a fantasy character. So, your GM or your author or whatever you are, think of that as a fantasy character. And then give it its mythic medium. What would the mythic medium be? For me as a world builder, it is a bullshitter. That would be my superpower.
So you're saying this is kind of like a self-realization thing.
Yes.
Okay.
But in a way that it gives you practice at the creative side. But sit there and think about what is your superhero power as a creator. So if you were in a fantasy novel, obviously it's exaggerated, in the fantasy novel, but what would that mythical power be? Mine would be coming up with ideas off the tip of my tongue, and usually they sound fairly plausible.
I think mine would be manipulation.
Whatever you say.
See, it's working.
Wow. That is good. That is a superpower. And then for the real world task, this one's become very important to me as I've become older and sorer. I think over the past year, I've probably lost 20 or 25 pounds just moving more. And the problem is, as geeks, a lot of times we spend a lot of time sitting down at tables doing stuff or today
or in
more
front of a
than not,
screen.
in front of a screen, either a TV or a computer doing things, either hunched over typing, a joystick in the hand, giving ourselves carpal tunnel syndrome. We do a lot of very stagnant activities, which is making ourselves less healthy. And especially if you have like an accident in your background. Like I was involved in an accident back in the early 90s. And, I didn't really even notice it until like the 2000s.
Yeah, that's the worst. I did the same thing. Like my messed up back is from something that happened 15 some odd years ago, and I didn't know it occurred.
For me, it was 15 years after I had the incident.
I didn't.
Where all of a sudden my back completely gave out on me, and and I didn't really notice it. And I was actually going hunchback. I didn't even know it.
Yeah, the long and short of it is take care of yourself, guys.
And I'm really like 5'11".
You're not 5'11".
No, I am. I'm 5'10", 5'11". Yeah.
That's not true. Now you're just making things up.
Inches. I just got measured at the VA.
Jeff is 5'6". I am 6'3".
With the muscles of a jellyfish.
Yes. Yeah. Very, very, very. I can barely lift my own bones.
But the thing is, find ways to get not strenuous, but some kind of activity in your life. So for me, I've been trying to do a lot more walking. So like I can listen to podcasts or audiobooks walking.
Yeah, I get on my treadmill and I watch stuff, and I'll watch Firefly, Rick and Morty, and just I'll walk for an episode or 2 episodes.
Find a way to make it real. All right, folks. Very good. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.